Okay. Testing 1, 2. I think this works. It still feels odd, but that's okay. All right, so everyone has a Planning with Ease guide, okay? This is not mandatory, but we will use this to follow along today. But ideally, the goal is for you to take this home and really think through your own personal desires, situation, and wishes. But I'll do a high-level overview today. And then Luke, are we good to get started here? I'm assuming yes. Thumbs up, okay. So today is part 1 of a 3-part series. And this is all about planning. And more importantly, planning with ease. It's kind of an oxymoron to think that you should plan in the middle of a crisis. So our goal today is to really provide, hopefully, quality education and information to inspire you to do the all-important part of planning. And planning for those things that we sometimes don't want to talk about. But when we demystify it and we do a swan dive into it, it can take the fear away and give us really our autonomy and our independence to tackle these major life decisions with ease. My name is Erin DiCarlo. I'm the founder and president here at Dovetail Companies. My beautiful trusted partner, Lauren Watts, she's my co-owner and vice president. In part 2, you will hear from Joe Scott. He is our director of senior and specialty move management. And in part 3, Julie Ford is our director of home sales. I would love to take a minute to tell you about Dovetail, my experience and my credentials, to explain how this came to be. So for 15 years, I worked in elder care. I am a certified geriatric care manager. I'm a certified dementia practitioner, and I'm a certified senior advisor. So for many years, I supported older adults and their families when they were in need of information to make informed decisions about what services were available to them. But if you can imagine an iceberg, and we just see the tip of the iceberg above the waterline, there's a whole host of other needs below the waterline. And so for all of those years that I was in the role of advisor, I had to connect my clients with all of these other resources to address the other areas of their life. We are more than our current circumstance of needing care or assistance or advising. We have life experience and personalities and homes full of all of our stuff and financial needs, and you name it. And so in elder care, I think our industry has done a great job of building professional networks, but the process of engaging each different professional is overwhelming at best. You have to tell your story to each one of these professionals. You have to contract and pay each one of these professionals. And because of ageism in America, because we don't like to talk about it, we don't all embrace it, many people are making these decisions in the middle of a major life transition. The best decision is an informed decision, and the best time to get that information is when you don't yet need it. And so I had, about almost 8 years ago, literally in the middle of the night, I have 4 children, 3 daughters and a son, and my third daughter decided she never slept from birth. The child just didn't like to sleep. Does anyone know the Dr. Ferber method to Ferberize your baby? He's a world-renowned, this true story. He runs the sleep clinic at Boston Children's Hospital. My daughter was one of the only patients that his method did not work for. So, true story, in the middle of the night, she'll be 8 in April, so 7.5 years ago, I had an aha moment. I was helping support, at the time, 5 or 6 clients that needed all of these various resources, and sleep deprived. I woke my husband up, and I said, I have the solution. I'm going to provide a 1 point of contact resource for older adults to support all the various needs they may need when facing a major life transition. And he said, shockingly, that's brilliant. Let me know how I can help. So that was almost 8 years ago. And so the reason I mentioned my credentials in the beginning is making informed decisions about the options available to you is the first step. But then you actually have to execute that plan. And the whole goal is for me not to have to refer you to 5 other professionals. Lauren and I and our team are certified senior and specialty move managers. So we help older adults right-size their homes to either successfully age in place at home or to transition to a new environment and make it feel as much like home as possible. And then we are also what's called senior real estate. Go ahead, Debbie. Senior real estate specialists. When I started this business, I thought I would just partner with wonderful, kind, empathetic real estate agents. Coming from almost 20 years in the aging industry, I realized immediately that any fully commissioned industry, the ethical practices are not always where they need to be, and that I'd have to create a new way. We are part of Compass Real Estate. We joined forces with them a year ago. We were our own independent brokerage before them. We are the country's only premier listing team for seniors specifically. So the only side of the real estate transaction that we support is our mature sellers. This will be part 3 of our series. We feel very strongly that our clients have very different needs than other real estate clients. And so really making our clients' equity work for them in their home later in life is most important. Because as we'll talk, the options as we age are very expensive. And for many of our clients, the home is their largest financial asset, and they need it to work for them at this later stage. And so we'll explain that more in part 3 on the process that we advise and how it really creates successful outcomes. But all of our services are separate. Meaning some clients just need support with planning, some clients need help with downsizing, some need help with real estate. You don't have to use all the services. So now that we've laid that groundwork, I believe the most important part of this process is what we're talking about today, which is planning. How many of you, show of hands, have already really started thinking about your options and doing a deep dive into aging in place at home, or looking in and touring senior living communities? Show of hands, how many of you have here, you've started thinking about it? Any of you started thinking about it? Okay. How many of you have actually already started narrowing down your choices? Great, okay. How many of you have your plan? You know where you're going? Wonderful, okay. And how many of you? I don't know. I just came to this event. I don't really know what I'm doing. Yes, thank you for being honest. Great, you are in good company. Believe it or not, this is the best time to be at a program like this, to help you start to think about where do you even begin. I can't tell you how many times we receive inquiry phone calls that say, hi, I learned about your service. I need you to come help me downsize and manage all of my stuff. And I say, okay, great, where are we going? Well, I don't know. Why are we worrying about the stuff? Unless it's to age in place at home, and but so many people feel that they just first have to deal with the stuff, then think about where they're going, or they'll call and say, so I'm ready for you to clean out the house because I'm ready to list it for sale. Where are we going? Well, I don't know. Well, why are we selling the house? So I'm glad that you're with us today, even if you're in the very infancy stages of that, it's the best place to be. Okay. So I am first and foremost an age well advocate. What that means is I do not subscribe to the doom and gloom and fear narrative around aging here in America. And here's why. I have helped thousands of older adults later in life, the majority of whom are thriving. I've witnessed people living really well later in life. That is a huge gift that I do not take lightly, because my perception of aging is not doom and gloom. Even with cognitive impairment or physical decline, We have the ability to live the best life that we can, within reason, by making specific choices for ourselves ahead of time. And so if you are feeling not so positive, easy for you to say, Erin, in your 40s, with your heavy makeup and your coffee, you feel so great, you don't have the aches and pains that I have. But I have the example of many client cases through the years that help support that story. And that's not to minimize. It's called the negativity bias. It's how we survived during caveman times. We lean into fear 3 times heavier than positive thoughts, feelings, and emotions. We're built that way, where it's in our genetic code. I mean, look at the news, read the newspapers. Fear is what controls people because we're built to lean into it 3 times more than positive thoughts, feelings, and emotions, because we would get eaten by tigers if everything was great and we just skipped through the meadow. We haven't evolved to that point yet of leaning into the good feeling emotions. What I'm here to tell you, and we did a lot of this work through the pandemic with older adults, it's called positive psychology. It's an entire area of study. Show of hands, has anyone heard of positive psychology? That would be a great program, by the way. And we have the ability as humans to completely shift our own mindset with small, simple practices and techniques. But one of them is to get excited about our plan and make it a reality. And it starts to shift and outweigh the doom and gloom and worrying about kids or loved ones stepping in and taking over, because they can't and they won't when you've handed them a great plan already put in place and remain in control. We just came from a program actually at the Newton TV Center, Community Access Television, where we talked about the importance of parents don't want to be parented and why parent-child role reversal happens. But when you make your own plan, you redefine your independence. So many older adults say to me, well, this sounds great, Erin, but I want to stay home because I don't want to lose my independence. For some reason, we attach the word or the notion of independence with physical independence. Like, I'm not using that walker because I'm going to remain independent. Really, the walker is going to help you remain independent. But where I'm going with this thought is, as long as you remain in control over your life decisions, you are independent. You are controlling what is happening to you, your environment around you, and so now's the time to do that. And the goal without a plan is just a wish. I'm leaving this house in a body bag. Oh, okay. That, we can put a plan together to support that, but just making that statement doesn't make it a reality. There needs to be a plan to support your wish. So if we become incapacitated, do we have to adapt the home? How do we pay for the home care? We're looking at that whole plan. Did we then communicate that to our loved ones? But that is all can be a reality, but it can't just be a wish. We need to take the blinders off, get clear on what we want for ourselves, and it is easy. I know it's easy for me to say this is what I do all day, but it's not that heavy of a lift. So hopefully you leave today with some peace of mind. All right, so these are the 4 scenarios that we find typical. So the first, you're in crisis. And by the way, that's okay. Sometimes crisis can be a blessing in disguise because it forces you to make decisions. Unfortunately, at Dovetail, we see this scenario a lot with couples. Together we are whole, it works, and then an immediate loss of a spouse creates kind of this deficit and this need for a total shift in a plan. I joked with one of the couples here today, make sure you have 2 of these planning guides, because as couples, our needs and wants are never the same. What I'd like to see for myself in my future may be very different from my spouse. And that's okay, your plan will reflect that. What you may choose now together as a living option may change drastically if one of you were to pass. When one of you, not if. What are the 2 guarantees in life? Thank you. So we have to shift our words around that. Second is, I've done some progress. Something happened. My friends passed away and they went through probate and it was a nightmare. And so I've done some legal planning, or I have a will. But then I kind of got derailed and I didn't execute the entire plan. But you've put together bits and pieces, but you feel still discombobulated. Show of hands, how many of you have an estate plan in place? How many of you have a financial plan with a financial advisor? Wonderful. How many of you have met and reviewed your plans with these professionals in the last 3 years? Last 1 year. So pretty good job. It's a pretty good turnout. We have a lot of clients who have these things in place, but they have not been reviewed in a long time. We recommend every 3 years or a change in your life situation. I have a client right now who called me yesterday in a panic. She had put her children in the trust and on her deed years ago. The son passed away, and she does not trust nor get along with the daughter-in-law, who is now on the trust and the deed. By the way it was written, because her son was, and now she is heir to all of his. So things happen, and it's time to reevaluate and update. And then this is where we hope our clients will be. Okay, I'm getting there. I'm gaining information. I know what my options are. And then our goal when working with our clients, we have the information, we have a plan. When the time comes, it's easy to execute with ease. Not to get too lofty, but I do want you to take a second to think about this. I mentioned positive psychology. So traditional psychology, or the practice of psychology, is there's some level of suffering for the human, the individual. Fear, anxiety, sadness, depression, or whatever. And traditional psychology says, what do we need to do to help this person not be miserable? How do we help people be at a state of kind of zero? So there's no pain, there's no suffering. I don't know about you, but in this lifetime, I'd like to be more than just not miserable and at a zero. I'd actually like to find happiness, excitement, contentment, engagement, fulfillment. That's the area of positive psychology. How do we get from a zero above and up? And the way that we can measure that for people, and I'd like for you just to take a minute to look at each one of these pillars in your own life, because this becomes the basis for your plan now and in the future. We as humans have, and so this, by the way, this is how we measure our overall well-being. We have all these lofty words now in our society, right? Mindfulness, well-being, all these things that seem hard to measure. So this is how to measure someone's overall, your own well-being. First, positive emotions. We have to have feel-good thoughts and experiences in each of our days to shift to a better state of mind. So please, for a moment, just think about how many times throughout your day are you having positive feelings and emotions? Unfortunately, you have to actually do the work for these things to happen. If you turn on the TV or read the paper, that's not going to happen. Having 4 small children at home when COVID first hit, coronavirus, I turned it off. I have not watched the news since. It just didn't help my household or myself focus on any of this. Second, engagement. We have the basic human need to feel engaged in the activities that we are doing throughout our days. Look at your day-to-day. I'm so glad you're here. It warms my heart to see our senior centers thriving after this pandemic, because I think we all realized, we're not, we're herd animals. We're not meant to live in isolation. But what activities are really engaging you? Relationships. And for many people, by the way, engagement and achievement was your profession potentially, or raising your children. So we have to replace that with other areas of engagement. Relationships, we have a need for deep-rooted, connected relationships with one another. What is that looking like for you? Is there opportunity for you to make either new relationships or reconnect with relationships you've had in the past? Meaning, this is more existential. We have the need to kind of connect and leave this earth with a deeper sense of meaning in life. For some people, this is volunteerism or their spiritual beliefs. So really looking at your current situation and thinking about, for your plan, how to meet each one of these pillars. Achievement, we have to feel successful at the task at hand. We will become derailed, overwhelmed, unmotivated when we're trying to do tasks. Hopefully the next presentation, the downsizing presentation, you'll get some great tips. We have people who say, this weekend I'm gonna clean out the basement. No, you're not. You're gonna find a box of photos or something, and you're gonna sit down with some tissues, and that's not happening. So you have to set yourself up with success, with activities that you can actually complete and feel good about achievement. I'd like to see much more of this in some of our memory care communities in the area, helping people fold laundry, set tables, things that we can do that we're good at, that build up our self-esteem and our confidence. And then health. I added health. This is not, it's called the PERMA model of well-being. Martin Seligman, who's one of the four founders of the positive psychology movement. I added health because I think we have to talk about it. I don't think it defines us. I think most elder care professionals start with health. Tell me about your aches and pains. Tell me about, are you a fall risk? Tell me about your memory. It's important, but I think it's the last pillar because it's not all of our well-being. If I heard stay safe one more time during the pandemic, I was going to jump. We can talk about that, but how about tools for people to shift their mindset and find engagement and connect in new ways? That's what's going to lead to our quality of life. But I do believe health is, I do believe health is important and on the list. Oh, you're fine. I'll put it right here for now. You're welcome. Okay. All right, so here are the essential elements of your planning. Where are you going? So if you've already decided that home, by the way, the home that served us while we raised our children is usually not the same, if you have children, is usually not the same environment that served us well in our 60s. And the home that serves us well in our 60s typically doesn't work well for us in our 80s or 90s. But yet most of us live in the same home we've lived in forever, and we just kind of age in place. So really thinking about, if you're staying at home, how do we make those spaces work well for you at home and redefine your home space? If you're not planning on staying home, where are you going? This is a whole program in itself on helping identify the best options for you. But maybe it's not like a senior living community. Maybe it's right-sizing into one floor living or condominium. Who is in your support network? Now this is part of, we'll go to this page specifically. This is the biggest piece, and for me, I think the most important piece of the plan. Who is helping you? And we'll do a deeper dive into that because that's where the ease comes into this. If you're trying to tackle all of this on your own for the first time and just kind of muddying through it, it's going to be much more painful than it has to be. But aligning yourselves with experts, with the right friends and family who are willing, able, and have the skill set to do the task at hand can make this much more manageable. Your finances, I hate to talk about the elephant in the room, but no matter what scenario we discuss, we have to put a budget to it. Thankfully, we live in Massachusetts with some of the best funding for elder care in the country. So it's not all about the haves and the have-nots. There are wonderful resources, but you need to know what they are and have a plan for it in a budget. What to do with this stuff. I can't tell you how much our belongings represent us and our life and our memories and our emotions and our ancestors and our experiences and our achievement and our work and our family. This is a big part of the process, is managing our stuff, whether you're downsizing to stay home or to move somewhere, and then selling the long-time home. I mentioned the reason we created our real estate division was because it is a big piece of this for people, really that financial component of the home, but it's not the only piece. And we believe strongly that's actually the last piece. finding where you're going, getting there, managing the contents, and then dealing with listing and selling the home is the way we support the process. And so, but it's a big part of it. Up at the planning stages, you may not know where you're going because you need to know what your home is worth to create a budget. So although you may not need to sell yet, you may need to know the realistic value of your home years before it's time to get to that point. Okay, so defining home. Where are you going? So aging in place, there's a lot to this. Aging in place, you can age in place anywhere that you choose to live. So we have clients who move into continuing care retirement communities, independent living, but their plan is to never use the continuing care piece of that. Their plan is to move into the independent living and age in place in the independent living, for example. Or in their large home and bring in care at home, or to age in place with a family member or an adult daughter. And then obviously, that's the living with a loved one. Senior living communities, I'm not going to get into a deep dive. This is an area of my expertise. They are all different. If you've seen one community, you've seen one community. They all operate differently within the state regulations. They have different contracts. There are rentals versus buy-ins. The buy-ins are all different as well. So please know that if you are considering a communal senior living community, there's a lot of information and resources available to support you. Or other. We have clients, I have a client right now, she lives in Cambridge, and her sister is in Chicago, and they're moving to DC together. There's a reason why. They have a cousin that lives there, and they just both love DC, and there's nothing holding them in Chicago. They don't have family in either location, so the two sisters are moving to DC. So it may be something totally different. I had a client who, you've probably heard of this, she cruised full-time, cruise ships. That was her plan. She loved to travel, and so she had enough funds for 22 years of cruising. She did the math. You can have a live-in home caregiver with you on the cruise ship, and the more you cruise, the cheaper it is. Yeah, there's a physician, there's a nurse on all cruises. I mean, you name it. So that was 7 years ago, and she emails, she's still cruising. So who knows? This is the fun part. Okay, I should have started today's program with this. This is fun. You are the author of your next chapter. No matter what has happened to you up until this point, I don't want to minimize it, but this is a fresh slate. What happened to your friend or your cousin, or you heard so-and-so's daughter put her somewhere, that is not your story. You have yet to write your story, or maybe you've already written it, which is great. I'd love to proofread it. But this is meant to be exciting. When we remain in control over our life decisions, we can have fun. Please have fun. Please, life is too short to be miserable. And everybody knows we can't control what happens to us, but we can control how we respond to it. Listen, and I don't mean to stand up here and preach. I mentioned I have 4 young children. The oldest is about to be a teenager. It's hard. It's not always easy. This isn't easy. But, life isn't. So we just have to shift and pivot when we need to. All right, support network. Family and friends. We all have different support networks. We may be solo agers without traditional support networks. We may not be married. We may not have children. Or we may. Just because you have children, by the way, doesn't mean that this is any easier. Sometimes it's harder with more cooks in the kitchen and family dynamics, but that's okay. The most important part of the planning process is engaging your friends and family in conversation about your wishes, so they know when it's time to execute parts of your plan that this is what you wanted for yourself. How many of you have multiple children? Please tell all of them the same thing in this plan. I read a beautiful article once. It was about 5 children who flew into town to manage their mother's affairs because she had passed away. And they got into a huge argument about the mother drinking their milk. So every night at dinner, when she would pour their milk, they all agreed that she would take a sip from each one of their glasses. Now, their perception of her reason why varied greatly between all five. One thought how rude she could pour her own glass of milk. Why is she drinking from our cup? The other thought she was tasting it to make sure it wasn't spoiled. How kind of her, you know? The other one was temperature. She was checking the temperature, whatever. The reality is our children have different relationships with us. They have different perceptions and personalities of their own. And so what you tell one, it's like the telephone game. By the time the message gets down, engage. The other gift we give our children when we have these conversations is for them to do their own planning. Who says we're going to live a long life? Where is that written? What a gift if any of you have lost children. And I'm so sorry for your loss because I can't imagine it. It's a gift to our parents when we have our plans in place as well, because no parent should have to go through that. So where I'm going with this is sometimes you get to be the example for your children by putting a good plan together. It helps them start to think about their future. And by the way, when they learn the cost of things later in life, now's the time for them to plan with, you know, life insurance, with chronic care riders or long-term care insurance or whatever. It may be too late for you, but it's a perfect time for them. But because we don't talk about aging or death and dying, I know these conversations can be challenging, but what do you have to lose? You have everything to gain, and you can preserve your children's relationship by having these conversations up front. So hopefully that's enough of a catalyst. Don't assume, I don't know if the next slide shares this, don't assume that your children want the roles and responsibilities that you would like to assign them. And don't assume that they want your stuff. That is the hardest part of my job, is telling my clients that their children don't want the things that they've been hanging on to for them. So my daughter definitely wants the china. She doesn't. Sometimes, but you know, or this, whatever, the hutch, whatever it might be. But what they do want is to hear the stories about the china, or to reminisce with you about the holidays at the dining room table or whatever. So using these conversations to engage on a more existential conversation, which is very cathartic for both parties. I want to share this story quickly and hope that I don't repeat it in the downsizing program, and hope not to cry. My grandmother, my nanny, my closest person to me growing up, she wore these plastic enamel bangle bracelets, probably from the 50s or 60s, brightly colored, thick bracelets. So as a child, whether she was combing my hair or preparing meals or doing dishes, I could always hear the clangling, jangling of her bracelets. My grandmother passed away when I was 20 years old, my senior year at college. She took care of my grandfather who had Alzheimer's disease, and she was the healthy caregiver. And out of confusion in the middle of the night, he went to wander, and she tried to stop him. He pushed her out of the way. She fell and broke her hip. And once she was in the rehab, within 6 weeks, she passed away. And my grandmother was the first person I had ever lost. And so I had a very hard time processing her death. And I became a hospice volunteer. I mentioned to you my broadcast journalism college experience briefly. I was working at WBZ News Radio when my grandmother passed, right after my grandmother passed, and they were advertising hospice volunteers needed. Actually, at the time, 2005, it was West River Hospice in Newton. Was a new hospice company, it's no longer here, needing hospice volunteers. So when my grandmother died, I, of course, asked my family, where are the bracelets? I said, what are you talking about? We saved her wedding band for you. I said, no, the plastic bracelets. And they said, oh, that junk? We tossed it. Because to them, it was junk, trash jewelry. To me, I would probably wear them to this day. So engage in conversations about your belongings with children and grandchildren. You'll be shocked to learn what they're attached to versus what you think they want. The other thing about these conversations is we assign roles to children, assuming they're good at it or want to, or you name it. Please ask them, like, if I were in need in the future of your help, what would you like to help me with? There's a workshop in here where you list out who are, worksheet, you list out who are the people in your life and what roles would, it's under support network. By the way, if you are watching this on television, all of this is on our website, or we can email you a copy. So it's dovetailcompanies.com, or just send us an email, info@dovetailcompanies.com. But ask them what they're able and willing to do, and are they good at it? So just because your son is a financial advisor, usually he may want to step into that role, but it may be too close for home, or maybe you don't want to share that with him. But maybe he loves, I don't know, playing golf, and you do too, and so he'll be the one to take you golfing. Whatever it is, assign not only the roles of, my daughter will help me with medication if she's willing and able and good at that, but fun things. You know, Mary, you're the one with the kids. I'd love to make sure that you're the one that takes me to their events, or whatever. Try to pepper in. And then again, this is something you review as your needs change over the years. You sit down and hash it out again, and what their ability is. And then who's in your legal and financial? So in legal, it's really important that your estate plan is done with an estate planning expert. In the legal field, there are general practitioners. They may handle divorces and taxes, and, oh, I can do your trust for you. Please make sure that, and I'm sure there's resources here, and we can recommend wonderful estate planning attorneys, because the laws in Massachusetts are ever changing. Your own situation may be ever changing. And there's many times our clients are having to redo their estate plan because their wishes change. So maybe home is working really well for you right now, and so your trust and estate plan supports that, but maybe in the future, home is no longer a viable option for a variety of reasons, and now you need to tap into some of the equity of your home. There are trusts that allow you to do that without tax implication. Financial. How many of you have a financial advisor who you had for years who has retired, and you've been passed on to a new advisor? We see this a lot with clients. Make sure that you're in alignment with your financial advisor, and that your financial advisor has the expertise for working with older adults. And again, I'm sure the center has wonderful recommendations for trusted financial advisors who are experts. Later in life, you need your money to work for you, but you need it to be safe, typically, to afford the longevity of the rest of your life. For some of our clients, a lot of our clients may not have a financial planner, but now is the time where you need to engage one. If you have a $1.2 million property that you're going to be selling and you're moving into a community, that money needs to be safely invested to return some sort of return on investment, but safe, because that money needs to last you until end of life. So working with trusted financial advisors who understand the cost for care or aging in place at home, that's where someone like myself works with you, your estate planner, your financial planner, and this whole plan gets put together in a cohesive way. The finances is a big part of this. We unfortunately have too many of these calls. We wish we didn't have. We have clients that will be on a wait list at a certain community option for years. The phone rings, they're up, it's their turn. And that's when the community does the financial and medical review, and then it's determined that they're not financially fit for the community. So these are the conversations. You want to make sure that the options you're choosing are in alignment with your financial budget. So creating that budget up front, working with your financial advisor and your estate planner, you want to make sure you're in alignment with that. And even if you're staying home, the tax implications of having a quality trust, avoiding probate, I mean, all of that is well worth your time to put that plan together now. So this guide, there are some things in here. This third one, while I'm still talking about financial, this really helps people think about and plan out, what are all of my expenses being at home? If I'm considering other options, what are the costs? What's included? What are the costs in comparison? Thinking about, if you do think that you're going, a decent amount of you have toured options and considered not staying home, really thinking about what that process should be like. I do want to implore you to think about, most people think, okay, I need to declutter my house, get it on the market, and then move to wherever I'm going. We think it should be the opposite. And we understand when we have these programs, it's the first time people are hearing this, so I'm going to let that settle in. I wish you could see your faces. Huh? What is she saying? Okay. First, where are you going? Let's focus on getting there. Getting excited about the floor plan design. What are we bringing? What artwork are we hanging on the walls? Really designing this new life. Packing, moving, settling you into that new space. You can take a breath. Then step 2, managing all of the contents back at home. So we manage estate sales, donation coordination, clean out services. Now on that first part of the process, we were making that plan with you. We're not just going back to your house and doing what we want. We planned that out with you, but you're not living through that. You're not living through the chaos of us, if you're having an estate sale or donation companies. You're not living through that. But third, preparing your home for sale when you and your belongings are not there. And here's why. Your home will sell faster and for much, much more money when you and your stuff aren't there. More importantly, just emotionally and logistically, this is the strongest real estate market in history. And by the way, don't listen to the news, and here's why. Real estate is lumped all together, buyers and sellers. This is a horrible market for buyers. It is a fantastic market for sellers. And in the third part, we'll give you all of the numbers, the statistics. There's no inventory. You, as mature sellers, own the market, which means you own the price. And so your needs are very different than everyone else, but that's not changing anytime soon. If you sell in a year or 2, God strike me dead if I'm wrong, but we look at all the numbers month over month. Interest rates are never going back to where they were. We saw what I call unicorn interest rates during the pandemic. We'll never see those rates again. Rates are just stabilizing. Rates in the 6 and 7s is an average rate over 30 years. Do you guys remember the rates in the 80s? 18, 19%? This is fine. Everyone needs to stop panicking and comparing it to 3 years ago. But what that means for you is anyone who refinanced or bought a home at those low rates isn't going anywhere. They can't afford to buy something new in the 6s or 7%. So that means you own the inventory. So we tell our clients, don't worry about the real estate market. Your home value continues. I'll show the Wellesley specific numbers on part 3. Up and up and up and up. Put a plan together, take a breath, put yourself at the center of this equation, and the rest will fall into place. There are some interesting, people say, all right, that sounds good, Erin, but how do you do that? I have to sell my home to afford that next step. So this is the time to talk to your financial advisor, talk to your bank. A home equity line of credit, when I was during the pandemic doing these programs and the rates were 1.99, 2.2, I would tell everyone, go get your home equity line of credit and just let it sit. But now those rates have grown as well. But if you don't have a lot of liquid cash, a home equity line of credit is great for an emergency. If you needed home care, or you needed to adapt your home quickly to return home, and you have a home equity line of credit sitting and waiting, that's great to have for the future. Bridge loans, there are short-term bridge loan companies. We work with a private lender if someone just needs a short-term bridge loan, but also your financial advisor. We have 3 clients this year that were able to borrow from their IRA, have the cash back in within 100 days, and there was 0 tax implication or penalty. So this is why having a plan and your finances and your budget, I don't want to bore everyone with numbers, but there are ways to do this so that you can recoup all of the equity and the resale of your home. So the way I just mentioned how we deal with your stuff, pack and move, and then list and sell. The process of right-sizing and dealing with your contents, and we're going to talk about this much more next time, is different for everyone. How many of you would consider yourself collectors? You have a lot of what you would say stuff at home? Okay, thank you for being honest, yes. There's a different way for each of you that we would advise on how to tackle that, but for everyone, it's in manageable bites. So we're going to talk about this at the next session. What I'd like for you to do today when you leave here, while it's fresh in your mind, is think about, when you think about your future and what's most important to you, what are the top 3 things that you want for yourself in your future? In list of importance. Your plan should match those 3 things. I'll give you a quick example. I had a client in Lexington who I met with, and they were considering, they hired me to help them, the 4 options they were looking at here, help them make an informed decision on which would be best for them. I asked them when we first sat down, each of them, they were a couple, so different answers, but what's most important to you as you think about your future? Both of them, for number 1, said family. So I said, okay, before we talk about the options, tell me about your family. We have 3 daughters and 7 grandchildren. Well, that's wonderful. Where do they live? They all live in Chicago. I stopped the meeting and said, why are we looking at options here? And they said, what do you mean? I said, you both said that your family was most important to you. And they both welled up and said, oh my God, why aren't we in Chicago? And so we looked at, and I worked with a senior move manager and care manager in Chicago to identify, they moved 2 years ago, meaning our plan should start with our goals. What's most important to us? I once had a woman tell me that faith was number 1. Her parish, visiting services at her parish was most important to her. And I said, when's the last time you went to Mass? And she said, before the pandemic. Why? Well, I got out of the routine. I'm not driving now. I picked up the phone in the moment, called the parish. They have a wonderful transportation volunteer program, and she went the next morning to 9 a.m. Mass. Sometimes we just get in our heads or think it's going to be more complicated than it is. Start with today, your planning. What's most important to me? What do I envision for my future? And then we can easily put the plan in place to make that a reality. I'd love to open up this part of the program to questions. If there's any open, bigger existential questions or more specific. Yes? Yes, great question. For any of you at home watching that didn't hear that, we provide a whole array of resources. However, we're not experts in everything, but we will always connect you to whatever the resources that you need. I'd say about 50% of our time is truly pro bono, just making sure people have the information they need to make informed decisions. And it is always a true complimentary consultation to meet and talk or just have a phone call. Yes? For our services. The question was, like, as far as contracts and compensation, what is that relationship? So we start with a complimentary consultation, usually at your home, to get to know you, see your environment, see kind of the size and scope of services needed. Every complimentary consultation is followed by a detailed estimate for services. So if you're just looking for, if you need help with downsizing, depending on sorting, organizing, donation coordination, you would have a detailed estimate. If you needed what I call options counseling, there's a rate for options counseling and a detailed estimate for those services. After you review the estimate and the client agreement is when you would make the decision to hire us. So it's not like a retainer based or it's an hourly rate. So our move management services are $105 an hour. Our options counseling is $150 an hour, but there's parameters to it. I can't tell you how many people say, okay, $105 an hour, it's going to cost like $30,000 for you to help me. I don't know where that number comes from for people, but it's not as much as, we have the process in which we work is very streamlined and effective, but it's not inexpensive to have professional help, but it's not as expensive as some people think. But every single one of you, I guarantee, would have a completely different estimate from the other. So there's no like average cost. For options counseling, it's usually about 10 hours has been our average, so about $1,500 for comprehensive options support and decision making, but that can be less or more depending. Yes. Yeah. Mhm. Depends on what you're buying. So if you're doing a tip, so did everyone hear that question? That I typically recommend to buy first and sell later. And is that really true? Like, does it make sense to do a bridge loan or whatever? So first, it depends on what you're buying. So for our clients that are not doing a traditional real estate purchase, they might be moving into a senior living community, for example, or a rental option. Almost always it makes sense to do this. If you need to purchase a traditional option right now, I'd have different advice for you, and I'll tell you why. If you are a cash buyer against a sea of buyers trying to purchase right now, you may be better off selling first so you have cash in hand with a better offer. We can talk about that. I'd be happy to just pick my brain anytime about that. So it depends on what you're looking to buy. But in some cases, I have a client in Arlington, $273,000 more they were able to sell their home for by moving out, cleaning it out, preparing it for market. So in that case, the numbers help them make the decision. So if your home could actually, if you have to pay a high interest rate for a bridge loan and it costs you $30,000 to take the bridge loan, but you could make $200,000-300,000 more by doing it, it's the best decision is an informed decision. So depending on your situation, there's different advice. But typically speaking, it makes more sense to move first if possible. Great question, and I hope you come to part 3 where we do a deep dive into this. There are 3 things it takes to sell your home pretty quickly and for top dollar. Preparedness. How prepared is your home for the market? I believe very strongly with you and your belongings and some potentially small things done to prepare your home. You're prepared well. Priced accordingly. No homes should be sitting anything over 20 days in this market. It's either a pricing problem or it's not prepared well. And the third is patience. But if you are prepared well and priced accordingly, you don't need much patience. I do feel strongly it takes, when people say, oh, I sold my home in a day, huge red flags. The market didn't have enough time to see your home. All the buyers should have time to come and see it. But it should not take in this market if it's and marketed well. What you're paying, when you pay your broker a listing commission, you're paying for them to not only guide and prepare your home, but to market it and invest a lot of money in marketing it very well. And so we have some of those guidelines for you in part 3 of our recommendations for that. You should not see homes listed and sitting. That means there's a problem. Sometimes people choose a broker who tells them the best price they'll get for their home, and then it sits. So there's a lot that goes into it. Yes?
Have you had much experience with tear-downs?
Great question. Have I had much experience with teardowns? Yes, but not as of late, and I'll tell you why. The cost of goods to build and the cost of employment to hire people to build those homes is through the roof right now. And so many builders who are buying, or investors who are buying these homes, are paying bottom dollar for them because they need the budget. And so we're finding homes that may have been considered tear down previously, end user buyers are paying top dollar to get into towns like Wellesley. So do not sell low to anyone. I always say the best buyer for your home is not always the best price, meaning sometimes people want to mortgage it all. Just because you got the high offer doesn't mean that's the best offer. But if a builder wants to tear it down and pay you top dollar to do that, that's your choice to accept that offer. But it's been a while since we've seen those cases because they don't have the budget to compete with the end user buyers. I will tell you this, buyers, and we'll talk about this more in part 3, but buyers would rather or can't mortgage a home that's already prepared than spend less and have to do the work themselves. Does that make sense? So a buyer will find a way to pay $100,000 more for a house that has a fresh coat of paint and the floors redone than spend 100,000 less and have to do that work themselves. And we have a whole process for that and a partner. We carry all expenses till closing, but every single time you recoup more money in your pocket at the end. Did you have a question in the back? No question is stupid. That is what we do. As senior and specialty move managers, my team, we are the packers. So the movers, we're managing them, we're telling them where to go and what to do, but we do the pack and the unpack. So if you have a hutch with your china, we're taking pictures, packing, unpacking, and recreating that in your new space. We have fine artwork vendors that we work with in movers, humid controlled, depending on the items, but our team does the packing, our movers do the heavy lifting. Oh, yes. That's a good point. People underestimate a move. Oh, I don't need you guys. Like, we can handle the move. It's a lot of work. Physical, but emotional. I don't think people give themselves enough emotional space to work through the emotions of this big move. If you have a trusted partner who can handle the logistics, it allows you to focus on the emotions. But yeah, that's the unfortunate part. Sometimes we provide consultations. People say, you know what, we can do it ourselves. And then we get the call right before the move, we need your help, and we're booked. We can't always help. We'll get resources who can, but yeah, it's a lot. And the older we get, the more challenging it becomes. Any other questions? Thank you all for joining me today. I really appreciate it. Yeah. Oh, great question. It's in the newsletter. I'll get it for you. I think it's each one a month. Yeah, February is downsizing with ease. However, if you need it sooner than then, we do have recorded versions of these programs if you're just really curious now. But Kevin, do you know the date of part 2 and part 3 offhand? Okay. Oh, the 15th. Thank you. 15th, February 15th at 1:30. Bring a friend. Part 2. And okay, great. Yeah, part 2 is downsizing, and then part 3 is understanding the real estate market and really talking about how to, tap into the equity in your home. Thank you for coming, everyone. Pleasure. Thank you. Thank you.